one medium dry vodka martini, mixed like you said, sir, and not stirred.
Thank you.
Anything else, sir?
No, that's all.
Dry martini, lemon peel, shaken, not stirred.
Vodka?
Of course.
Can I do something for you, Mr. Bond?
Just a drink. A martini, shaken, not stirred.
Should I have said vodka martini center?
Shaken, not stirred.
Of course.
The lady will have a Bacardi on the rocks.
For the gentleman, vodka martini, shaken, not stirred. Vodka martini, shaken, not stirred.
Vodka martini, shaken, not stirred. Vodka martini, shaken, not stirred. Mr. Zagorski will be delighted to see you.
Vodka martini. Maybe rice. Maybe one spare it.
Dry martini.
Oui, monsieur.
Wait. 3 measures of Gordon's, 1 of vodka, half a measure of quinoa lily. Shake it over rice and then a thin slice of lemon with it. Vodka martini.
Shaken, not stirred.
I look like I give it down.
All right, guys. So James Bond. James Bond is a guy I think that we all like to watch on TV in movies. If we didn't like something about James Bond, they wouldn't have made 17,000 movies with 1,500 different actors playing James Bond. And when you look at James Bond, I look for the things that he does that inspire us or get us involved and engaged in these James Bond movies. And I think part of it is that he is willing to take risks. You see him jumping out of airplanes, scuba diving, attacking sharks with his bare hands, and fighting crazy people all over the globe. And there's a part of that that we look at that, we're like, oh, I want to be like that. I want that. I want to do that. And so we watch this in the comfort of our own homes, but we don't realize that sometimes we take a lot of risks in our own lives. And some of these risks can be, you know, joining off to the military, coming to school at Northwest University, not sure how you're going to be able to afford it. There's a lot of different risks that we take. And I think a lot of times that when we take these risks in our lives, we encourage ourselves to be shaken to some degree. We feel a little bit more alive, and sometimes it's the risk that shakes us, sometimes it's getting caught that shakes us. One example of that is when I was 8 years old, I got a basketball hoop. It was the Dr. Jace 7-foot slammer. I loved that thing. And I would play basketball indoors, and one time my cousin was over, and we were shooting hoops in the living room, which is totally where everyone should be playing basketball. And I go for the high arc shot, and I shatter a glass globe that was covering a light in my house. And I'm 8 years old. As far as I know, that light covering is $1 million. And my parents are going to repo me when they come home and get rid of me, and I am not going to have a place to live. And so I started to pray a very familiar prayer for all of us who have lived in Christian households and grew up as Christians. I was like, Jesus, if you'll just heal this lamp right now, I will do everything you want me to do. I will be well, maybe I won't be a missionary in Africa. I don't like that. But I'll be a pastor, I'll do whatever you want. If you want to come back right now, Jesus, the second coming, and take us all to heaven before my parents get home, that would be really great too. And it shook me to my core. And yet, I think even though we go through all these different elements in our lives that shake us, not often are we actually stirred into life change, stirred into making a permanent change in our lives and how we do things. And so even though I was okay, my parents loved me, they were a little mad at me, I was grounded. I found out that light coverings don't cost $1 million, but they're not cheap either. You would think that maybe that could stir me into never playing rowdy games indoors to make a life in my change in my life, but that is not the case. And there are many other times in the future where I did ridiculously stupid things. And I'm still standing before you today, and that's by the grace of God. But another person who we're going to talk about today who had a lot of experiences in their lives where they were shaken, and it wasn't until much later on in his life that he was actively stirred, is the story of Jacob, Jacob the patriarch. Jacob comes from the line of Abraham. He's the last patriarch that we find in Genesis, and he has a lot of interesting things that happen in his life. right from the get-go, he's born as a twin. He's the second twin, the youngest twin of Jacob and Esau. Esau is the older one. And when he was born, it was prophesied that he would be greater than Esau, that God spoke to his family and said, even though Jacob is the younger, he will be the greater of the two twins. And you start to see these events in his life that play out, that show how God's providence acted and made him the greater in the sense that we would use the term. One of the but the funny thing and the interesting thing about this is that even though a lot of this is done through God's providence, a lot of this is done through the will of God, they are done tricky and sneakily. And it's interesting that Jacob's name means the supplanter. And a lot of us may not be familiar with the phrase supplanter, and we may be more familiar with the other term that the name goes by, which is being underhanded. Being underhanded is a phrase that was coined in 1530, which meant that you had one main hand that you showed everyone. These are the things I work with. This is the good hand that I deal with. This is the hand that I show people. The underhand is the sneaky hand that comes underneath the main hand, and it was a phrase that was used for people like assassins, for gamblers, for sneaky people, for even just petty thieves. To be underhanded just meant to be a scoundrel, a Han Solo, so to speak. And you see this play out very quickly in the life of Jacob. One of the first things we find about Jacob is he's an educated man. He's an intelligent man. He's kind of a mama's boy, whereas his older brother Esau is a manly man, a hairy man who likes to go out and shoot things and grunt like Tim Allen on Home Improvement. And one day he comes home. He had a bad hunting trip, and he was starving. He was very hungry. And his brother says, you know what? I have this bowl of stew right here that I'm willing to give to you if you will just give me your birthright. Which is the most ridiculous statement to ever say, because it's kind of like going up to someone and say, I will give you the Snickers bar for your brand new car. And Esau, like every intelligent, manly man, takes him up on the offer because food is awesome, right? Am I right?
Yeah.
So Esau trades his birthright to Jacob for a bowl of soup. Shortly after that, we find us with Isaac, with their father, who has gone blind, and he thinks he's going to die. He's really concerned. He's worried. He wants to pass on this blessing, this Abrahamic covenant, this promise from God that they would have a nation that would be built out of their bloodline, that would count more than the numbers in the sky, that the Messiah, that Jesus would come from this bloodline. He wants to pass on this blessing, and since Esau was the manly man, since he was the father's favorite, he brings Esau in behind his family's back and says, hey, if you go out and kill a deer, make me some really good soup. This family loves soup. I don't understand it. They love their stew. But Isaac, he's blind. He can't see anything. He can taste things. And he wants some venison stew. If you go out and do this, bring me stew, then I will give you my blessing. And the funny thing is that Isaac's wife hears this, and so who does she turn to? Her mama's boy, to Jacob, and says, tell you what, go grab a goat. I'm going to take this goat meat, and I'm going to make it taste as good as venison stew. And I'm going to have you dress up in a goat corpse, so that you're hairy like your brother, and I'm going to have you trick your father into being blessed. It's a really weird family situation that's going on in the Isaac, Jacob, Esau household. Maybe something that would go on reality TV if it was going on today. Because I can just imagine Jacob coming in with a goat wrapped around him, and he's trying to play it off like he's his brother. Maybe he has kind of a high-pitched voice, and he's trying to talk down real low, like a 12-year-old who's trying to act like an adult. But it was good enough to fool Isaac, and he receives this blessing. And even though he does these things, he gets a birthright, he gets a blessing from underhanded activities through sneakiness, we're going to find out in Genesis chapter 8 that this is something that is honored by God because God had sovereignly said this from the very beginning. And so in Genesis 28, we have this situation where Jacob is frightened. He's scared because he has already taken Esau's blessing, or birthright. He's taken Isaac's blessing, and Esau, he's out for blood. He wants to kill Jacob. And so Jacob's mother and father say, we don't want you to marry anyone in this area. We want you to run away. We want you to find the family of Laban and just let Esau cool down for a little bit. Because it's funny that the Bible says that the only thing that calmed Esau down, the only thing that helped him keep composure, was the dreams and thoughts of him murdering his own brother. That is a healthy family relationship. And so Jacob bounces, he takes off, and he gets kind of tired, pulls up a rock for a pillow, and decides to take a nap. And in this nap, he has this dream of a stairway to heaven. A lot of us have heard about Jacob's Ladder, the stairway to heaven. Huey Lewis in the news wrote a song about Jacob's Ladder. We've all heard the song Stairway to Heaven. And throughout this process, God basically says, Jacob, I'm here for you. I am with you. I'm your God. I'm the God of your forefathers. And he confirms and he affirms of this blessing that was put on Jacob's life. And you would think that this would be something that stirs Jacob, that would get him to say, all right, God, I'm on with you. I want you to tell me what to do next. I want to follow your will. And yet we find that this is something that not only just merely shakes Jacob, but he begins to do the thing that Jacob is known for doing. He begins bargaining with God. So Genesis chapter 28, verses 20 through 21, we see, then Jacob made a vow, saying, if God will be with me and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat and clothing to wear, so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then the Lord shall be my God. He doesn't say, God, I am submissive to you. God, I follow you. He says, God, if you hook me up, then I'll let you be my God. Which is really just a twisted way of looking at the relationship that we're supposed to have with God, because we can't bargain with God. We can't put God into our debt. We're a created being who serves God. And not only that, but after he wakes up from this vision, the Bible says that he builds a pillar to God. And if you look at the patriarchal history, the fathers of Jacob, the fathers that came before him, you have a history of these fathers, these father figures, these patriarchs, building altars to God, sacrificing to God, and being submissive to God. And yet, Jacob does not build an altar. He builds a pillar. He will not build an altar until later on in Jacob's story. And this is interesting, this whole paradigm of being shaken and stirred. And I want to tell you a little bit about what this might look like in real life. So this is my family. That's me. This is my 3-year-old daughter, Kira, my wife, Christina, and our newborn, Ashlyn. We just took these pictures last Thursday. These are our Christmas photos. But right now, I want to focus on something that happened the night that these pictures were taken, and focus on my 3-year-old daughter, Kira. Kira is an adventurous and exciting girl. She loves to run around and shoot cats with Nerf guns, and she likes macaroni and cheese. She changes her, one of the things I do every morning before I go to school, before I go to work, is I ask her, Kira, what's your favorite color today? What's your favorite animal today? Because it changes every day. Today, her favorite color is blue. Her favorite animal is bears. She likes blue bears today. Yesterday, black dragons. So, as a girl who's adventurous and exciting, she gets into a lot of trouble every now and then. She's a very well-behaved girl, but she's 3. And so she's not always going to do everything we tell her to do. And so Thursday night, after we'd taken our Christmas photos, she went into the bathroom, and my wife's hair curler was there, and she grabbed it and she burnt her thumb right along her thumb. And it broke open, and it was pussy and nasty, and you just didn't want to deal with it. So we rushed her to the hospital. We waited in the waiting room, and we tried to be very respectful to the hospital community there. And, you know, it was a good situation. It was about a 2nd-degree burn, and yes, she was sad, and she learned something as they had to peel and cut the dead skin off of her hand and wrap it. But she's a very happy girl right now. We're very blessed that she didn't grab it with her hand, that she just burnt the back of her hand. But the thing is that this is something she's going to remember probably for the rest of her life. It's something that may scar her physically on her hand. And she's going to know that I shouldn't grab hot things. Sometimes it takes an amazing thing to stir us, the intervention of God, these great things that happen to us. Sometimes it takes difficult things as well. And yet, as a people who need to be shaken, who need to be stirred, we are also a people who like to take risks, and a people who like to work really hard. And examples of this are seen from the very beginning of time. In the Garden of Eden, we have Adam and Eve who eat this apple because they want to be like God. We have the Tower of Babel, these people who create a tower because they want to raise up and meet God. And we have all these situations. I see you, Jason. And we have all these different situations where people are constantly trying to attain godhood, or to at least meet God. And the way I like to think of it is we like to create our own stairways to heaven. And we find out that in this situation with Jacob, that it isn't a stairway that we build to heaven, but it is a stairway that God builds to come down to us, to interject into our history, into our life. And when you look at the book of John, Jesus himself says that Truly, truly, I say to you, you will see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man. Jesus is Jacob's ladder. Jesus is the stairway to heaven. Jesus is the thing that God has used to affect us, to stir us into a lifelong change. And as this Christmas season comes up, I want you guys to look at the story of Christ, to look at the stairway that God has created to us, and realize that we cannot build a stairway to heaven, that we are a people who God has built to us. And I think that it was said appropriately in the words of Wayne Campbell, the theologian, when he said,
No stairway. Denied.
That's it.
That would be something.